Good morning. Welcome to the live daily self mastery series. Today I'm wrapping up mastery, and next week I'll be kicking off leading teams, starting with one to one interaction. Self mastery may sound familiar, but it's far from it. For many years, it was widely believed that personality, intelligence, and identity were fixed. The assumption was simple: you are who you are, and improvement, learning more learning more techniques. What changed is not motivation or culture. What changed is our understanding of how the brain and behavior actually adapt and adopt new models. Hint, the brain doesn't like one reason people think self mastery is what they already know. The brain loves to be efficient and new things look like for, for efficiency. It makes sense, right? If you're the brain. Self mastery is not about hacks, trends, or temporary boosts. It, hold on a second. It's it was telling me that self mastery is not about hacks, trends, or temporary boosts. It's about installing reliable patterns that hold pressure, even intense pressure. I used special ops training as the standard, training as an airborne ranger, SEALs, and also martial arts and fighting in tournaments, etc. I used that standard because there's a kind of a calm that you see consistent across martial arts masters, special ops soldiers, whether it's SEALs, Navy, special forces. Most people already know what to do. The gap is not knowledge. The gap is execution when it matters. I often say knowing and not is like not knowing. This is why the four pillars of self mastery exists. It's not a philosophy, and the pillars are not personality traits. They are control surfaces, practical levers, influence identity, coherence, habits, and feedback loops that determine how you recover, how clearly you think, and how consistently you show up. As a preview, being regulated is not actually being regulated. It's a series of recoveries, and when done well, these are at the millisecond level and not observable to the human eye. The aim is not perfect calm or permanent confidence. The aim is faster return, clearer direction, and higher reliability. And that looks like stability from the conscious mind side. When these pillars are practiced deliberately to be constantly regulated, not because nothing disrupts them, but because recovery becomes automatic. The compelling part is the same way habits have stayed with you for decades. Regulation in this way is trained as a habit with the same kind of stickiness. You begin to act from purpose instead of reaction, from trained patterns instead of, and from agency instead of overwhelm. Self management is accessible. It's not reserved for elite performers or special circumstances or requiring years of training. It's built through deep practice, identity alignment, loops that make progress sustainable rather than temporary. And I'll start with the current situation and build up to how you can begin making progress today. Now, it's a learned process, just like any expect to pick up new moves when it comes to muscle memory in just one setting. You practice it, you drill it, you break it down. And that's the same way that we do this. We will call it deep practice, and it's very similar to how you practice for muscle, because the focus is not muscle, the focus is building myelin to wrap the neural pathways with myelin, because that makes them the path of least resistance, and the path of least resistance becomes the habit. So we'll get into this now and take a look at some of the factors. Now, I talked earlier, a couple of days ago, about the landscape, the current situation, have sort of backdrop of what you think is your, and I share this not to say that this is what you should adopt, but I like to focus on things that are long term cycles, 20, 30, 40-year cycles. And the 80-year cycle that we're wrapping up right now is the change order, or better yet, the rise and decline of the world superpower. So the world superpower is the U.S., and the reserve currency is the U.S. dollar. This is an 80-year economic cycle, so it drives a lot. It's not like this is what's going to happen to you. The economic cycle and there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes. We're about somewhere, and so what a lot of people think of as the baby boomers did this and did that, and millennials are like, hey, the baby boomers destroyed it. We actually had a world when we were growing up. All you had to do was show up, and you get promoted, get results. You show up and you make sales. One, population was growing like crazy because we were in a boom, but two, and then the baby boom had offspring, and then you had to buy diapers, and so that economy was just growing like gangbusters. And because there was so much going on, and because the U.S. dollar was the world currency, you had 197 countries gravitate towards it over time. So it was very easy to do this rise, and that's what one of the things that occurs though is that we get this sense that just hang in there, things will change. Just hang in there, things will change. Especially if you're a baby boom or an extra, you remember, oh, just hang in there. In fact, I didn't pay much attention to politics because it always reverted back to the mean, and the mean was always good. Now that reversion back to the mean it's not stable like you would think. It's actually moving, and it's on a decline. So the momentum is against you. Now that's just my backdrop. You could read Dalio's Changing World. Just go to YouTube and watch the video by the same name, Changing World Order. There's a 4-minute, almost 5-minute one, and then there's a 4-minute one. They say one is a summary of the other. Start with the 5 minutes and see if it resonates. If it does, you go and check out the others. There's other of these. You have the U.S. here, then you had Great Britain was before us, and these are roughly 80-year cycles, 70 to 100, at the end of that 80, which is why we're in the decline. And just like declines, things go a little faster, right towards the end. And then you had Great Britain, then we had the Dutch, EV, and you had before that, Spain and Portugal. And I bring that up because you had Spain and Portugal before the Dutch, which was a while ago, other entities. I bring it up because I don't know where this is going to go. We may, and by the way, so you have China coming up. And what's interesting is when you bring this up, so this part we don't really, after this, we're assuming this happens. But when you talk to people, and I should draw this as a dotted line as well, when you talk to people about this, it's interesting how people go into the patriotic mode, which is fine, right? But patriotic mode is, oh yeah, but China can't do this and China can't do that. And they miss the message. They miss the message that things are changing. And that's all I'm saying this for. This is not about fear mongering. It's not about losing position to China. I looked at the headlines for Great Britain decline from the world power, superpower, and the U.S. took over. The headlines for the average person, it's not really changing. There's a lot behind the scenes, politics and geopolitical stuff, who's in the office, those kinds of things change, currency things. And right now, there's a lot. If you just do some research, go down some rabbit, a lot going on with gold. Other countries pulling gold in, and some countries, instead of letting other people mine their gold, starting to mine the gold themselves. You've got another currency going on, right? You see, that's already in place. And currencies tend to go with the world power. They tend to go together. So in Great Britain, you had the pound sterling. With the Dutch, you had the guilder. With the Spain and Portugal, you had the Spanish peso. So they tend to go together. And so that if there's a new world superpower, there's going to be a new currency. Personally, in looking at everything that's going on and how the cryptocurrency is going, and also the smart money were they making moves well before the 2008 financial crisis. There are people who were already starting to make moves in 2004 and 5. And if you go back to headlines, you can see that there was conflicts, there was contradictory headlines, because they were making moves to look over here so they could go over here. By the time the crisis, some of those toxic mortgage, those things were being sold so far offshore. By 2006, 7, it was almost impossible to ignore attention in that space. I think as I look at what some of these moves are, the gold, the trade conflict, you got the currency, you have the petrodollar being challenged, etc. You have finances shifting, all of them on, and I think it's the players who are in the know working through this. Obviously, they'll stop it. Worst case, you want a soft landing. You don't want to end where they typically end, which is with wars. And I agree with that. But I think that because of all the shenanigans going on, what we'll end up with is two, a multi, and I do think that there is another one coming up somehow, somewhere, but with all this gold that's available in countries that have not been players, and if we do shift from the theme of fiat currency to gold standard currency, those countries are well positioned. So who knows what that is? You could have a multipolar view, and I think that's a very high possibility. The other thing I look at is the amount of people who don't even pay attention to this, that they don't care about it. You see the young families out there. There's one thing that I will tell you: young families will take care of their kids and they'll take care of the environment where their children are being raised. And so a lot of this stuff that looks like Armageddon and oh my gosh, it's happened before. And there's always shifts. Even in the Great Depression in the United States, at the height of the Great Depression, height of 100%, financial crisis, at the height of unemployment, it didn't exceed 10%. Those two dire situations, the employment was at 70% and 90% respectively. That's why I say this is not fear mongering. It's about understanding that changes, because a big change coming. So doing things the way you've always always done it, you're going to be behind by the time you get started. So that's one point of view. The other point of view I like to bring out is that all through my adulthood, working time, we subconscious as a mind. The subconscious is not a mind; it's a network of neurons. But you have so many textbooks, and it's been called a mind for centuries. And how do you change that overnight? It takes generations to make this shift. It's They're now teaching about neurons in school, but they're still not calling the subconscious a network of neurons. It's still being called a mind. It takes a couple of generations for a change like this to take place, which is why I harp over and over. It's in the labs. You can do the research. The research is available to anybody. You can go look it up. I say you can Google it and you'll find some model. I encourage you to do that so you come up with your own model of the world, because I have a view that comes from martial arts, ranger training, military, working on how to proceed without ever having prayer hit me. And that was one of the biggest ones. I knew that was possible, and I wanted to know what the best of the best know when it comes to calm and pressure. And the big deal is that there is a major design. So this is the network of neurons, and this side is the conscious mind. This side here, fast, network, nonlinear, and its associations. And fast doesn't do it justice. Side processes at 11 million bits per second. This side processes at 50 bits per second. That's 11 million versus 50. Fast doesn't do it justice. In a race, this side would finish before this one is even out of the conscious mind is linear. It's sort of a once and done. What I mean by that is we are taught in school class that excellence is about getting it right the first time, that when you come up with a plan, the smartest people are going to have a plan that actually works. And so we spend a lot of time making sure that we've all the stones. But in a fast world, and the more we have artificial intelligence, the more technology plays a role. roll. And just think about what the curve looks like from 40 years ago to today. So technology has been increasing. We had the computer, then we had computer on desktops, computer at homes, computer in everybody's workplace. Then we had the phone, and then we have the internet, and then we have, when I said phone, mobile phone, and then smartphone, and then we have artificial intelligence. So we're on the very vertical part of exponential tech curve. So the more we have technology playing a role in our lives, the more we are living like this. So what I'm talking about today has always been available for us, and the best, the Olympians, etc. They've used this martial arts masters, special ops, Navy SEALs, Rangers used this because it worked. They didn't understand the way I'm talking about it today because they have the scanning tools to see what's going on with the network of neurons. With this, so it's been available. What's different is you can't escape it because it's getting faster and faster and faster. In other words, if you look at it like a continuum, the world is shifting from a conscious linear agricultural view to more of a network linear fast view, fast processing. But before you think about technology over, remember this neurons, associations, the past is very, very fast at that, but it can't do something the conscious mind can do, and that's relate by definition, associations, you're not going to relate the unrelated because it's not there. It could force it, but it's not going to be smart about it. It's going to be like all over the place with no direction because it doesn't really have the direction. The last thing I want to talk about is what it looks like. So I have a set reset, and under that, I have 7 phases of the 1 second model. That 1 second model is the stimulus response cycle. Stimulus response cycle, second, normal surface. It can be faster. Obviously, when you're triggered, it can be slower. And slower is better when you are designing, especially in the field of impossibility. But when you're reacting to fighting a tiger, you want it. But most of us don't face tiger level threats often. So we don't need that speed all the time. And that half a second that you save by being fast really benefit you because a half a second could be a pause. I just paused for a half second and just then. It doesn't change. So that what you see by going fast, even though it's what's been trained and you learned it in school because the teacher would ask a question and if you didn't respond fast enough, you got yelled at. And so we learned that we got to be fast. We have to be fast. And now the news and social media, everything's about speed, speed, speed. And we've lost accuracy. And people are responding to artificial intelligence stuff and thinking it's real and posting it around and sharing it before they even fact checked it. So there's a and governance has always, since technology has come along, especially the internet, governance has always lagged behind. So, you know, good luck letting government provide the governance because you're going to be left behind. You have to do this yourself, and that's why I talk agency and personal leadership. You can't wait for other people, and that's why this is such an important topic for me. So, in this regard, the 7 phases I talk about second model. So 30 plus thousand times a day response cycle. We're awake about 65,000 seconds a day. So every other second, we're getting the stimulus response cycle. So these dots represent SR cycles. And 85% is by habit. We don't notice them. Most of them are happening unconscious, like 30,000 plus. The 5% that's conscious, you know about those, but most of these are we keep doing the same thing, which is why are going to be like our tomorrows, or our tomorrows will be like, and this is why artificial intelligence is scary to some people because it seems like it's really, really smart. It's just really, really fast at making these associations, and it knows how we think because if we've been operating 95% by habit, all the content that it learned from it has habitual theme to it and eating what's been done. So when you ask intelligence to come up with some ad copy, it knows what to do because it knows how the words are copy. It knows how sales presentations look, and it works. The danger for us is that we are going to be, we're already being bombarded with sales literature's copy with ads, and they're mostly faced. So that kind of escalates the well. But the other thing that happens is people start thinking artificial intelligence is smarter than it is. It's very good on the association side. And when people start apply artificial intelligence to conscious mind type problems, I think that they're in for a rude awakening. I'm going to pause here because I want to connect the dots on something, and then we're going to come back to this. So I said the path to self mastery, the four pillars of self mastery. This is something new. You may think you've heard the term is what it is, but I'm telling you, there's nothing like this. I've been working on this for 5 years, and I've been challenges. I've been looking to debunk it. I've worked with neuroscientists to look for, so it didn't start out here. It started as something else, but I kept iterating, looking for off, and this is where I've landed with this. And so we have the 7 performance areas. This is where it started. Physical, spiritual is what we can control. And you see it says be there. It says be. This is on be, do, have. And then emotional is the do. And it's not only the gateway to the side, this is what we want. And it involves other people. So we have to have regulate before we can go here, because over here you're going to get knocked off center. So relationships, professional and financial. We don't start here, we start here. And do, what's interesting is we're going to have feedback loops, and I have talked about doing laps around these. You want to get good at before you go too deep into this side, because you want stability and agency at all times. But the do influences the be, and then improve the be, it influences. So this is truly a feedback loop process, and then the have will grow. The one part that doesn't jump out at you with this particular slide is that this is not something that you're going to be doing every 3 years. You don't have to go and work through this every 3 years. Transformation. This is transformational work. Once you have your purpose, and I can tell around long enough and working with purpose and working with people, I use purpose in developing high performing teams. I will tell you that over decades it morphs, and that's why purpose is never going to be this pure vision kind of statement. And it's directional, and the general part doesn't change. So once you get all this locked in, yeah, you will tweak it, you will pivot, but it's not going to change for the most people. And I'm generalizing. It's aligned with emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence has 4 pillars: self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. Nothing intentional intelligence, but when I look at self-determination theory, competence and risk, you can see that emotional intelligence is a vehicle to achieve intrinsic motivation. The Where dynamicship comes in, it brings those two together. It adds another component, and that component it adds is total regulation. So you have agency and personal leadership all the time, and you're able to actually lead others to have the personal leadership. You can't make them do it, but you can certainly create the environment. And the point that I make here with emotional intelligence, the limitation is that when it was created, we didn't have the brain scanning tools to tell us that there's a separation between the network of neurons and the conscious mind. Now, obviously, they've known there was a difference, but in terms of seeing the network of neuron, subconscious mind, the belief here was that your person can't change, your intelligence is fixed, it won't change, your identity won't change, and the identity of your people won't change, that they are who they are. And so you have to, so emotional intelligence is filled with corrective tools and strategy. Leadership is it's preventive, and we use the dopamine and serotonin to achieve our goals, which we'll start talking about the one-to-one and the leadership series. There's the 7-step reset. You can take a screenshot of that if you like, but we're focusing here. 2, 3. 1 is development. 4 is the response. So I should say 3 and 4. 2, 3, and 4. 1 is the development. 2 is the steady state where we are. 3 is the stimulus reaction. 4 is the response. So together they make up 1 second, but the battle is right here in this half second, which is the conditioned reaction. Then you have the response. We've spent time on the emotional modulation, the action, and the presence return. Get good here at these 2, 3, 4. Then you're able to use more of what you already know, and we look for new opportunities where are the weak links. And this is the of those 3. So this is the state. This is kind of what we're talking about when we say regulated, and that's what I wanted to. When I say regulate, actually talking about recoveries that are happening at the millisecond level. I have said many times that it's not, people know about growth mindset versus fixed. Not just about having a growth mindset. It's about having a growth mindset, knowing when you get knocked off of that growth mindset, and recovering to the growth mindset in seconds, not minutes. Now I'm saying even in milliseconds. The point, stay in a growth mindset, not because you're staying in a growth mindset, but because you're recovering so quickly. And most people realize that they can have a growth mindset and yet within that same topic area have mindsets. And it holds them back. And they don't realize it. As a coach, it jumps out at you. So this is the network of neurons side. This is where we have speeds working in the background, 11 million bits per second, all just mind side. This is where you can think. And so what happens, this side has to convert the signal that's going through neural pathways into what can be perceived as a thought or a bodily sensation, emotion, a feeling, or something like that by the conscious mind. So the conscious mind cannot really interpret what's going on through the signals. But there are ways, and NLP got into this, there are ways to kind of sense and kind of get a feeling of what it's talking about, the essence of it, and that together. But here is going at the root. It's looking at these two separately and managed in such a way. So when we talk about visualization, there's more visualization strategies that we use over here. Other visualization strategies are over here. And that's what I mean when I say we're going to condition the habits in at the nervous system level. We're not going to ignore the conscious mind. We're not going to rely on knowledge. We're not going to rely on insight, power, personal power, discipline, or willpower. We're doing it at the habit level, so you're not using up those valuable attention units and bandwidth that we have, which translates to willpower. So back to this drawing here, what I cover is these. If you think about it, this would be steps 7, looping back around 1 and 2. So this 7 is from the previous one. You have 7, 1 and 2, 7, 1 and 2. You're at a certain place of doing, that's your 1, and number 2 is whether or not you're regulated. And that's the point here. We want to return back to presence before that next stimulus comes. Now, if I blow this up, these, and I say that you have a stimulus. So there's 30 of these happening in a minute. Think about that, 30 per minute. And if I say that you have, this is response cycle. So this is about seconds. I mean, this is response cycles, one here and one here. You have about 2 seconds in between them. And if you get triggered, you get stressed, and you don't get it under control, what you'll see happen is escalate. This is where in neuroscience terms, the sympathetic nervous system starts to priority, and it starts moving this up. This is where the shallow and the muscles get tight, and if we don't get regulated before we get here, what'll happen? Stimulus and overestimate the threat. We're not doing that. It's the network of neurons and it's biased. That's why we have the positivity exercise to retrain it. So that everything is a threat, it looks at it as neutral positive. And so then something comes in here that's mild, but it takes off again. And what'll happen is as you're going right, as one is climbing and one is climbing, even if there's no external threat. So let's say you see an email and it really changing for you, that becomes the external threat. One email. Now, what happens next is because these are going so fast, and they'll start speeding up as we get into stress, the beta brain waves speed up. This gets the next thing you know, the network of neurons is looking internally because there's no more threat. Trying to justify this tiger level sensation with looking for what do you find? You find that this is like something that happened before. You find like, oh, this is the other shoe to drop. Oh, that person looked at me funny. Oh, this is going to be hard. Whatever it is, you come up with different ways to add to that, and it's all internal load. It's not even threat coming. It's just stuff that you're bringing. You're using your associations. It's all happening on that network of neuron side. It's just the associations and neurons that together wire together. So it's just this process, which is why recovery becomes so important. And this is why in a lot of my drawings, when I talk about a lot of my talks, when I talk about moving above the line, we have this, and we try to go above the line here, and it knocks us back down. And that barrier is full of stories and beliefs and habits and these other things, and it keeps us from crossing it. Joe Dispenza talks about it like crossing the river, very similar about it as this barrier, and you get a lot of cognitive dissonance to do. So when I talk about this work, person who knows that they have more in them, they want more, and they want to lean into that and show up as the version of themselves. That's why do I do this content for. If the people who are interested in doing this, just like in Good to Great, where he found the companies that outperformed the competition, they did so for a full 15 years straight, significantly outperforming because they made that anyway. If you are comfortable, for people who are doing this doesn't make any sense. It's too much work. But for people who want to do this, it makes it available with only 1.5x at most the effort. Think about that. This, you're going to spend 1x the effort anyway. If you can do this with 1.2x, why not? There's only 20 hours in a day. And if you can do 10x, you're doing it with 24 hours a day and you're still going to sleep. How you do things differently and how you make and what shifts you make. And then the last thing I'll say before I jump back on the side is an analogy. If we are driving and you're navigating a turn, and most people have driven a car, and you know that if you don't pay attention to the road, you're going to go off. And by making, there's usually a line down the middle, you have a lane marker, right? And from a distance, this is what it looks like. Navigating the curve. But if you can, at just 1 segment of that curve, like blow this up 30 times, this is what that line is actually doing. If you drive a sports car, it'll be a little tight. If you drive a truck, it'll be a little wider. But it's still, for all of them, they look like this. And these are those micro adjustments that you're doing to stay on course. You close your eyes while you're going to be off course. You know you're making these constant adjustments. When you're watching race car drivers, they're flying triple digits. It looks so smooth. But when they show you the hands inside, the hands are constantly doing this because they're feeling the traction. They are living the fastest of the fast on the edge where the tire is tearing. That's where this come from. That's the most amount of traction you're going to get when that tire is tearing. Once it starts tearing, once it tears too much, it's now sliding and you no longer have the traction. So when a car is drifting, they're not going to be anywhere near as fast as a car that's at that edge of traction. And that's why struggle at the edge of ability has this relationship to high. You want to be right there. You don't want to be too much. And when we get into leadership, monitoring that, so you're not taking your people too far and you're not coming up too short because they get bored if you're too short and they go too far. So what we're going to work on our own regulation, where you think the target is this, the target is really to go from this, something looks like this, to something that looks like this. So if you blew this up, just this one section, it might look like this. But this is happening at millisecond level, and so it's not even observable to the human eye. So what looks like perfectly calm and regulated, they're really just doing micro recoveries. And as you do this, what you'll notice happens is you'll have fewer and fewer of these stimulus response cycles. So in this slide, I talk about the 7-step reset. This is this 7-1-2, 7-1-2, in between every other second, 7-1-2, because 33,000 daily stimulus response cycles is about every other second if we're awake 65,000 seconds a day. So 7-1-2, 7-1-2. And what'll happen is you won't have 3,000 per day because you'll shift focus on what's really important. And when you focus on what's really important, one more time on the pad, and I'll do it this way. When you focus on what's really important, world through this lens. This is 360 degrees, and this is my direction. This is my purpose. If it was a class, you would have 11 over here and 1 over here. It's 30 degrees. This is 30 degrees. If you're on a bicycle, you know 30 as much as you can without having to change your speed, without having to slow down. If you're in a car going fast, moderate speed, you can change 30 degrees. If you're going really fast, it's going to cut that in half, maybe 15 degrees. But you're not asking yourself to make a 45-degree turn without this. If you border this with pain, if you do this with purpose and passion, and you border this with passion, you would now have a cone of focus. Which means while you won't ignore it completely, what's outside of this here, you're not going to be paying attention to the day. There's tons of news, tons of headlines. It's like, do you really need to get on the roller coaster when you have your kids at the park, or can you stand on the platform and wait till they come back? Right? It's going to come back. So you just check it once a week and so on, and this becomes out of scope for you, and that's why when I talk about the seven performance areas, that's you don't do this every single time. Once you get your purpose locked in and you're ranging, you have a range about 60 degrees total that you can from depending on what's coming your way. This is guiding your pivots. You don't do this over and over. Once you set that's why I call it a reset. Once you set your model of the world, your future, your vision, purpose, once you reset to that, direction is not going to change. Even if everything goes, and part of that is you want to pick a purpose that's 30 or 40 years. And because the purpose is about the greater good, you're serving a need for other people. 197 countries, you're not going to run out of people to serve. And because we can do things today, you have an audience no matter what. Right now, I think when I looked at it in 2014, it was 5 billion people had access to that. Now it's closer to 5.5 billion people, and the number of people is also growing. The gap is closing. People who have access to the internet, the number of people. I heard something where tribes, people still living in tribes, that kind of hunter-gatherer mode. They are moving from a priority of being near rivers to being high ground so you can get signals. This was 2014. So this is continuing to grow. That's why I say the future is going to be multipolar. And what it looks like, it'll be interesting to watch. And you want to have agency as you go there. You don't want to be having whipsaws every other time because it's such a difficult situation. Yeah, so I was just saying we don't need to have the 33,000. We get by on 5 or 10,000. I know that when I was growing up, well before the internet, when you just had a daily newspaper, I'm sure I wasn't that much information. It took you 10 minutes to ride your bike to your friend's house. How many stimulus response cycles are you going to go through? So now we're going to talk about why am I doing this now and why it matters. So what changed innovation? What changed is what we now understand about our adaptability. It was believed identity and intelligence were fixed. I've said that. Today we know that behavior and wiring adapt practice. This is deep practice. Look at neuroplasticity. Look up synaptogenesis. Look at activate synapses. Look at allostasis. All of those terms are going to take you down holes that pull all of this together. Knowledge alone outcomes. Insights does not change. I used to because it took so long for things to adjust, but the brain and nervous system, they're always trying to get back to status quo. That's the homeostasis, which is a level of like a stability, sort of a level. It's not really level because things are always growing, but think of it as a status, which is like that trajectory I drew with the line going up. That's the allostasis way. You can build stability in the allostasis way. You're constantly putting more demands on you and meeting those demands, but you're not adding more days. You're not adding more to the day. You're doing this by doing things in a different way. Reliability under pressure is the real advantage. And that kind of setting that flow where it's not too much and it's not too little. It's enough to keep you engaged. And we don't always want to be in flow. And when you're doing instantaneous recovery, that's what it feels like. So what is self-mastery? Self-mastery is not a personality trait. It's a set purpose sets firm direction. Identity shapes daily decisions. Habits create automatic execution, and feedback loops drive continuous improvement. This last bullet right here, big takeaway. So when I talk about iterative development, feedback loops. When you look at all your sports teams, they're using feedback loops. They go to the stats. They play a game, they go to the stats. We know how to do it because we do it in sports and athletics. What's missing is people have not en masse made the connection that the neural pathways that move our muscles work the same way. They're not the same ones, but they work the same way in terms of our cognitive processing. When you get this, you will shift how you do things because you'll embrace the iterative development, the iterative refinement. You'll see that it's necessary. Instead of trying for perfection before you launch faster and make adjustments. But in order to make adjustments, you have to have agency and personal leadership because those setbacks feel like failure if you're using the old kind of thinking. How we create the shift. Change becomes sustainable when identity, state, and practice align. So you want all of them to align. And that's what I've been talking about. Identity align, purpose, and then you get your identity to align. And this takes time. We're going to talk in a few slides. Coherence and regulation. What looks like coherence and regulation, what I'm telling you is actually memories, but they're happening at the millisecond level. This mind measures things at the second and minute level. So you don't directions, but it's just like being on that curve. You're adjusting constantly. Airplane pilots do it all the time. If you ever cockpit with a pilot, they're constantly altitude to keep that thing right at the same level because they can't see the wind. They kind of, but there's not a windsock in front of them all the time. They're just having to just adjust by feel. Iterative deep practice is why we can make this a habit. The same way muscle memory becomes a habit, and you go back to a sport that you haven't played in years, you still have some of the moves. This habit we can make micro recovery. Mental rehearsal with purpose is how we get to identity. So deep practice, what is it? And I encourage you to look this up because it's broad. On the physical realm, having 7 factors, novelty. When you deep practice is about telling the nervous system important, and so that creates the synapses activation, and it creates myelin wrapping. So you want something new, new ways of do footwork drills. I change it up constantly. Drill. Same with skiing and snowboard. I change up what I'm doing. I short radius turns, big turns, steeps, shallow, moguls, groomed. I just keep moving it around and trying for perfection in different things. Then that's intention. What am I doing with this intention? I want turns in a row, regardless of what the terrain does. I want to still hold my line. Precision. If you're skiing moguls, you want to turn at the top of the mogul, for example, and I want to progression. It's upping the ante. When I do 3, then I want to do 4, then I want to do 5, and I'm trying to get perfection. You have balance or complexity. If I'm talking cognitive, it's complexity. If I'm talking athletics, it's balance. So clearly that's going to come into play because I want to have my body in the right position. I want to go from the front of the board or the skis to the middle to the back as I'm coming out of the turn. So I'm moving that. That's the balance. It's intention, it's progression, it's precision. And then we have explosiveness, and in cognitive processing it would be intensity bursts because I do this like I can do 3 or 4 moguls in a row for perfection, but then I'm getting out of it. I'm not a pro, right? I was twice a week, so I can't like level. And it's been a while, I've been skiing for over 6 years, so it's sort of like is muscle memory that's from the old stuff, and every day I'm out there. And then the last one is struggle at the edge of ability. So that's the one consistent. When you look at deep practice for cognitive processing, it's struggle at the edge of ability and high intention and high precision. Those carry over, but the 7 factors are good about using, like if you're walking or hiking. That's why hiking is so good. It's a way of regulating because you're constantly coming back to what I do. And that's like you're making micro recoveries, not because you're actively recovering, and I'm talking challenging hiking. You're not actively recovering, but there's so many things coming at you. You don't have time to ruminate. You don't have time inside for things to be stressed about. So deep practice trains reliability, so behavior holds under pressure. This is why I tell you can make being regulated a habit. You can make coherence a habit. Training reliability, not all precise reps, high attention. That's what tells the system it's important. That's what gets them wrapped with myelin. Myelin makes the path of least resistance. Habits reside pathways. Hope you're making the connections. Error, correction, and then re execution. Take it to difficult situations because we want to see where the failure point is. If it works, yeah, then we got it. We reinforce it, go to the next level. If it doesn't work, this is what they do in special ops too. If it doesn't, you go back to the drawing board. You practice again. You keep doing it. This is why when they talk about missing an operation, they practice something because they're looking, they're attacking the failure points, and they keep going deeper and deeper and deeper into precision and complexity, into the struggle of ability to try to get the person to fail, not because they're mean, but they want to find the failure points so they can practice there too. This is how you build in automaticity, because that way builds the myelin, becomes the path of least resistance. And here's how you do it. Kind of repetitions. One is because you run out of mental bandwidth to do this. You get tired. 5 minutes and you're applying deep practice. 5 minutes is it feels like an eternity because you're so intense. People come away exhausted after a half hour of deep practice. Choose one micro behavior, define the failure, then short reps with immediate retry. The reason for this is you build a habit. Your dopamine is still like it. You get it right, the dopamine is going to, hey, you get a dopamine release. It feels good. Your serotonin goes up. It's a hit on the serotonin. And so you're using the nervous system to apply its already developed mechanisms to make you again and again in the right way and notice the failure points. And then you track recovery speed, not perfection. So you want to start looking at how do I get back on track? How do I get back on track? You don't want to, oh man, I messed up. Go back into it, do it again, do it again, do it again. That's why a basketball player, that's not the only reason, but have somebody passing them a ball. They're not, if they're shooting from the goal, somebody's passing them the ball. They're doing shot after shot after that. They don't want to ruminate. They don't want to think about that last shot. They're focusing, they're building that neural pathway. They're building it with myelin. Wrapping the neural pathway with myelin. And then deep practice, here's the target outcome. The goal is not calm. The goal is faster return and reduced volatility, because that's a micro recovery. Micro recoveries lead to appears to be regulated from the external and from inside. Reduced swings under pressure as a result. Consistent behavior across context. I say no matter how much chaos is going on, you can still have agency and personal leadership, and you'll be regulated, because no matter what, you can still recover. Now, if you're fighting a tiger, your microreads are going to be different, but you're still going to be able to be regulated because you're adjusting like that. Seemingly constant regulation, but it's really micro recoveries. Deep practice. Here's some amplifiers. Constraints and feedback accelerate wiring more than repetition alone. So like when I'm doing footwork drills, I may intro a watch. I'll use video because I want to see how high my highs are going, whatever it is. I love the Venue 3, the Garmin Venue 3 watch, because when I'm walking with the weighted vest and then I'm taking it off, I'm looking at the time, looking at what pace am I and how far can I walk with the weighted vest that I can do with no weighted. These are just different games. You can play all sorts of different scenarios, but constraints, silence, limits, whatever it is, whatever you want to apply, it depends on what you're doing. Why we do the 12-month follow-up after the 90-day transformation, because we have group coaching, and this is where we can help each other with these kinds of practices. Stress. You do not want to do deep practice on stress. You do not want to do deep practice in situations where you're struggling too much beyond ability, because you're going to have fight or flight stress coming in. You want to engage and out. You want to be diverging, not converging. Immediate feedback is where it is. I use cones, right? Because in footwork drills, you're using cones, because if you step on the cone, you failed. You can adjust real time. Frequency over duration. So you want to do quick, short ones, and then you get away from it. Do some other kind of working out. So a footwork drill session might be 20 minutes, and the actual working time is so short because you have to recover. Now, the next one is identity visualization. Visualization. And this is when I was talking about this purpose that you have. The world is changing so fast. You can't really visualize a purpose that is closing a deal that you're going to see tomorrow. That has a lot of sensory around it, sensory cues around it. You can make a picture of the person, the building you're in. You see yourself there. When you start working on your purpose, it's so far out there that you don't know what it's going to have something visualized. What you can do though is what we call identity visualization. And I'm bringing this up to make the point that you may have tried all kinds of visualization and at all, but there's more. And the identity visualization, what you're doing is sensing, it's awareness of this outcome of what you're going to be. Maybe it's standing in front of a building. Maybe it's sitting on your private jet. Maybe sitting on a plane thinking, or maybe you're sitting just on a mountaintop after a hike. Whatever it is, it doesn't have to be business. Whatever it is, it's a symbol. It represents, and it's something that you can use for 2 years. The reason I say 2 years is because what we want is stability. Meaning every single detail, but you want to have a stable imagery that you can do because people are going to be asking you, have you figured it out yet? Are we there yet? Have you done it yet? What's going on with it? What are you doing? What is it going to look like? You are building a foundation that goes enough so that your purpose can stand on top of it. Why? It doesn't look like anything is happening. And you start seeing progress, and the next thing you know, it's taking shape. But that could take 2 years. You can be in incubation for 2 years. It's different depending, obviously, and your vision. This, and then what I want to do is have clearer next steps. So that's why I talk about the on ramp. The on ramp would be like the foundation. So that's something you can think about. Work on the on ramp. You're practicing things. You're iterating, doing this. You're locking that one down. You're locking that one down. But all of it doesn't look. None of it looks like progress to the outside. You have to experience your own progress. That's why you use a stable image, and then you're looking for stability during chaos. Is what you're imagining. So this picture that you're keeping for 2 years or 1 year or 6 months. It's always stability during chaos because that's the target you're going to be covering right away. Decision, and by the way, this is not manifestation. It's doing is training the neurons, but when you're training the neurons, you have to maintain hope and agency and flow. That's all we're talking about. It's not mystical at all. And then you have your decisions will be aligned with my 7-step reset. We get back to response, emotional modulation, and the decision. Identity visualization amplifiers. Identity becomes durable when reinforced through environment and action, environmental cues and action and anchors. So I do my breathing in the morning. It's not just 10 minutes of 15-second breaths in, 15 exhale. That's just part of it. Yes, I'm oxygenating. Yes, I'm hydrating during that. But what I'm also doing is anchoring a state. If something hits me during the day, all I have to do is take in a breath, and that's my anchor to go right back to that state. It's the state I practice every single day. And with deep practice, this is how you get to the micro recoveries because I don't need to spend time being off center. Only one stimulus. Once I have that one stimulus and I do this thing, I have an action, I delay it, I'm going to delegate it, I'm going to do it, or I'm going to discard it, whatever I decide, and then I come back to it. I may make a note, set up an alarm where I come back, and then periodic refinement. This is the iterative development. I'm big on iterative and iterative refinement. Feedback loops, integration, feedback loops create stability. So this is, you want to have a takeaway, it's iterative refinement and development because these feedback loops is where you get excellence. If you look at all these great companies, it was always fascinating to me in the late 90s and the 2000s that these great companies stayed great, just like good to great. They always stayed good to Jim Collins did the next step, and he said the companies that didn't stay 2008 crisis, he then filtered to just the ones that stayed with it. And that's where great by choice comes from. You have the principles right there. He's already mapped for you how to do it in those two books, Good to Great and Great by Choice. But when you look at them, they use these kinds of principles, and they're always great. Intel was always coming through there. They were always beating applied materials. Dell was always, until they weren't, right? Point of good to great versus great by choice. Stability is not stillness, rapid, repeated course correction. You observe, adjust, observe, adjust, and you're doing it with agency and partnership. You're not doing it with convenience and efficiency. It's effectiveness. Wide swings become micro recoveries, right? So that's changing the amplitude, speed of return, absence of disruption. You're recovering. You're not trying to remove disruption. It's coming. You're recovering so fast it doesn't look like or feel like disruption. And then iteration beats linear effort. So these feedbacks are always in place. Treating them as a mysterious subconscious, we overlook the practical adjustments that drive real improvement. And that's the statement I say embodies this thing. These are control surfaces, not concepts. I said that earlier. I said these are control surfaces, like the flaps on an airplane. You're not going to be perfection. It's not about trying to get perfection. It's that you're going to be using these things, looking at your dashboard and seeing where do I need to tweak. So clarity, you've got to have that. And you have to understand the current situations, which is a backdrop. Now, will that back in? Sure. And then I'll adjust. Habit mastery, automatic execution. That's what this recovery, because without the recovery, deep practice, you're not going to have habit. And without the recovery, you're not going to be able to do practice. Then state mastery is the recovery. That's the micro recoveries, coherence and recovery speed. I could bring HRV into their ability, which correlates with willpower. But if you look at coherence, you're getting most of the way. And then forgiveness as a performance hygiene, not as a moral standard, but forgiveness so we don't have open wounds. We don't have relationship that can be triggered inadvertently when you least can get you off course. So we're taught excellence meant getting it right once, but in reality, excellence has always come from feedback loops. We simply didn't see how to train them. Some did. The martial arts masters did. The special ops folks did. Right. But mainstream, because we looked at it like a subconscious mind. And this gets back here. So if you want this, you just keep doing what you've been doing, and everything will be fine. If you go through this, expect some pain, expect some cognizance. The good thing, the interest about it, when you're through here, you get that cognitive dissonance. It's actually in most of the neuroplasticity happening because you're doing something that you're not supposed to be able to do. The brain has to rewire or reset. That's neuroplasticity to do it at night. So if you get that cognitive dissonance as you're going through here and you feel like there's another shoe to drop, or oh, this is it, I'm not going to do this, it's not available, just go to, do something else. You get the good night's sleep, you wake up, it'll flip from I can't do this to, oh, I have some ways to do it. And you'll get used to that. You have to work through it. So those days when you feel like it's impossible, it's never going to work, lock in on that. Do something else next day and just notice what's changed. And eventually you'll see it happening faster and faster and faster because you'll be spending less time in fight or flight. And when you're not, you'll naturally gravitate to focus and engage with where you want to be. So this is the live daily events on self-mastery. On Monday, I'll be going in February. I'll be going into leadership, but we're doing it from a one-to-one interaction because that's where leadership starts, getting people meet they are, and then moving to where we decide to go. It's usually 7 a.m. and sometimes I go 8 a.m. It depends on how much research I have to do before the session. It's a different topic. They build on each other. And you can get at 7stepreset.com/live. I usually put the next event there, and I also put the last event there. And then I am doing a workshop 4 pillars of self-mastery to take what we've been talking about this month. It's a workshop. Some of the content levers on practical skills, more focus on practice so you actually get to do it, because I want you to walk away from being done A to Z and experiencing those things. We do it on easy mental health, but we do it on easy things. So no triggering, no hard stuff, but you have to learn how to do it. It's sort of like if you're learning to ride a bicycle, it's getting a few pedals in. You're not going to take them into traffic right away. You just have to get some basics going, and then you go to the next step. So it's a live full day workshop with breaks and practice, and with some breakout groups. So other you're learning. I want to have multi modalities of learning so that it sticks. And that's happening. You can see the link there at 7steptransformation.com, self-mastery -2. And I'll also put that link on the landing page, 7.com/live. So that's it. I will see you Monday. Monday will be o'clock.